Hello everybody, it's Michael from Pellet Airguns with a comparison video for everybody. Quite often people ask me, well, in the past they asked me about the Gamo PT85 or the PT25 versus the Umarex PX4 Storm, which is a better gun. You know, all of those things, a lot of questions about what gun they should get. And again, it's a very individualistic type of thing. It just depends on what you like the look of. Are you looking for something that's more of a true replica? A lot of times these airgun companies will overinflate the FPS, and that's true a little bit with Gamo and the SIGs here. The companies have sort of claimed these really high FPS, and people base their buying decision on that one factor, when in reality, these guns all shoot about the same FPS. If you're using the same type of lead ammo or whatever, or high velocity ammo, they'll shoot about the same. Maybe 20 to 30 FPS difference. It's not a huge difference. So what I want to do in this video is just go over some of the similarities, some of the differences, what kind of materials each gun's made out of, if it's a true replica, if not, all of those things. So let's get started. First of all, some of the similarities or some of the same things for each of these guns, well, they're all made in Japan, and I'm assuming it's by the same company because they're all made in Japan. Some of these guns say made for such and such a company. The SIGs just say made in Japan. The PX4 Storm says made for Umarex. The Gamos say made for Gamo in Japan. So we obviously know that they're made by a separate company. And because a lot of them share a lot of similar type of mechanical concepts, I'm assuming it's the same manufacturer. All of these pistols shoot .177 caliber pellets, and they can be standard lead pellets or high velocity alloy pellets. That's where you're going to get up into the higher FPS ranges using the lighter grain pellets. Some of these will even shoot BBs or steel BBs, but I don't recommend shooting steel BBs in these guns just because they have rifled barrels, and that's the other thing, they all have rifled barrels. So you're going to want to avoid steel or hardened steel BBs. They all use 12 gram CO2 cartridges, and they all have a double-sided rotary stick magazine, so there's going to be 8 rounds on each side. You have to flip it over to get the other 8 rounds, but you do get 16 shots out of each magazine. All of these guns have a type of blowback action. With the pistols, you're going to find that the slides move back and forth on them. With the MP9 here, it's an internal blowback that actually works the action. So in other words, with this gun, you're going to actually have to charge it first. So the MP9, you're going to have to charge it first, and then the blowback, the internal blowback, will work that internal hammer and basically charge it for each shot. Now they all have, I'm going to say single/double action triggers. With the pistols, they all have a hammer that you can cock back, and the blowback action will cock that back. It makes the trigger lighter, but with the pistols, you can actually decock them in certain situations. Like the SIGs, they have decockers, or you can let the hammers down. On the PX4 Storm and the PT25, you can let the hammers down and then shoot them in double action, where you're basically using your trigger finger to pull back the hammer and index the pellet rotating magazine. Now with the MP9, it's an internal blowback system. You're going to need to charge the charging handle to work it. So the internal system is really single action only, but the indexing of the pellets is kind of a double action. Now you might notice I don't have a PT85 on the table. It's another Gamo pistol, very similar, I guess you'd say, to the PT25 mechanically and all that. Similar size actually, all of that. Just a sort of different shape, but in reality both models are very similar except for the cosmetic appearance differences. Alright, let's get into some of the feet per second performances. The Gamo PT25 has a claimed FPS of 450 using the PBA Platinums. So that's a lighter grain pellet. So with a standard lead pellet, you're probably going to be closer to 350, you know, that kind of range. And likewise, the Gamo MP9 also claims 450 using the PBA Platinum. So again, you're going to be under 400, somewhere between 350 and 400 using standard lighter grain lead pellets. The Umarex PX4 Storm has a claimed FPS of about 380, and that's fairly true. You're going to get somewhere again between 350 and 400 using standard lead pellets. Now the Sig Sauer P250 and the Sig Sauer P226 using 5.25 grain, and again lighter pellets. This would be an alloy pellet. They will shoot around 400 FPS, and those specifications were sent to me from SIG when they did their own internal testing. Using a heavier grain lead pellet, you're going to get closer to 350. In terms of weight, the Gamo PT25 here is 1.7 pounds. The MP9 is 3 pounds. The PX4 Storm is 1.6 pounds. The Sig Sauer P250 is 1.45 pounds. And the Sig Sauer P226 is 2.35 pounds. So this one comes in heavier, and we'll get to that, the reason why, in a second. Let's talk about barrel length. The Gamo P25 has a 4.5-inch barrel. The MP9 has a 6.5-inch barrel. The PX4 Storm has a 4.5-inch barrel, and both SIGs have a 4.75-inch barrel. Again, rifled barrels in all of these guns. Now moving on to the build materials, and that kind of will explain some of the weight differences. The PT25 has a metal slide with a plastic frame, so the slide is metal, the frame is plastic. Of course, you're going to have internal metal parts, external metal parts like the trigger, safety, hammer, all of that. That adds to the weight a little bit, but again, plastic frame. The PX4 Storm, again, we're talking a metal slide, plastic frame, lots of internal metal parts, external metal parts, but again, a plastic frame metal slide. Again, another gun with a plastic frame and metal slide would be the P250, probably the lightest gun on this table, but still, decent weight for what it is. And keep in mind, both the PX4 Storm and the P250, the real steel versions have polymer or plastic frames, so they are true to form. Now the last gun that incorporates a fair bit of plastic would be the MP9. It does have a plastic outer shell, and I believe that's the case with the real steel version. There's going to be a lot of internal metal parts, so keep that in mind. It does weigh in at about 3 pounds without all of this stuff I got going on here, so a lot of this stuff is add-on stuff, and I'll be doing a quick walk around of each gun, but keep in mind there's a lot of add-ons going on some of these guns, especially the MP9. Now the last gun I want to talk about in terms of materials is the P226 right here, and the P226 is really the only gun that has a metal frame, metal slide, and it actually weighs in at a much heavier weight of close to 2.5 pounds. I believe it actually weighs a slight bit more than the real steel version, but not by much. Now another factor you might consider when buying these guns is, does it have a cutout ejection port? And I will be showing you around again, but let's just talk about which guns do. And there's really only 2 on the table that do. Now if I had the PT85, it would also have a cutout ejection port, but the PT25, as you can see here, does have a cutout ejection port, same as the PX4 Storm. The SIGs do not, the MP9 does not. Now the last thing I wanted to compare amongst these guns is, are they based on a real steel version? So would they be considered a replica gun of sorts? So let's talk about that right now. Both of the SIGs, yes. Obviously the Sig Sauer P250 is based on the Sig Sauer P250. Likewise, the Sig Sauer P226 is based on the P226, and they're very, very close copies of the real steel versions. Even the way the safeties work and everything, almost identical. The PX4 Storm is based off of the Beretta PX4 Storm. It's a pretty darn good copy, other than this sort of weird safety you'll find on the PX4 Storm and the Gamo gun. I'm not really sure what that's all about. These are earlier versions of these guns. These guns came out later, so they've kind of maybe worked out some of the safety configurations to make them more realistic. The Gamo MP9 as well is based off of a real steel MP9, and it's a very good replica overall. Alright, let's do a quick walk around. Now all of these guns I've done full reviews, so check out the description in my video. I'll have links to the tabletop reviews for each of these guns, where I also do a full walk around and talk about some of the specifications and show you around these guns in detail. But let's just do a quick walk around of each one for you now. Again, here's our P250, right? It does have a working decocker, which is pretty cool. And you'll see that the safety is true to a real steel gun, right? Now these guns do have CO2, so I'm not going to work the action. There's CO2 in them. That's sort of the CO2 system. Your standard tab on this guy right here. I'm trying to do this on camera here. Okay, working magazine release, right? Here's your rotary mags that you're going to find on all of these guns. Okay, not really field strippable so much. Takedown lever isn't going to work. Not an open ejection port, as you can see. Okay, no real recessed barrel, but does have a Picatinny rail and fully SIG licensed. Okay, next up we have our P226, all licensed and everything. Again, takedown lever does not work. Decocker does. So decocker and safety does. Very nice. None of these guns, when they blow back and you're out of ammo, are going to lock back, just for the simple fact that with the rotary magazine you just can't do it. It doesn't have a follower like you'd find on a traditional stacked magazine. Because it's rotary, there's no follower, and so it doesn't know when the gun's out of ammo. It's just the way it is. Now, would it be cool if these guns actually had a slide catch that you could engage? Totally. I think that would be nice. Some people just like to lock it back for the looks, you know, maybe as a prop or something. That would be something I'd like to see, you know, these guys start to introduce in some of these rotary mag blowback guns. But, you know, nice looking gun, fully SIG licensed, right? This actually comes off, but it isn't really recessed. Got your pick rail there. Again, fully licensed. Okay, let's take a look at the PX4 Storm. One that I didn't mention, no cutout ejection port on either of the SIGs. You'll notice there is a cutout ejection port on the PX4 Storm, which is nice. I kind of wish the SIGs had that. Get in here. Alright. So there's that weird safety. This would be the actual safety. It's just molded in, so that's unfortunate. Metal trigger, Picatinny rails. You can see I have a laser on here. No recessed barrel, metal slide. You know, fully PX4 Storm licensed, Beretta licensed. CO2 goes in here on this one, okay. I didn't show you the other CO2. I can't really show you because I do have CO2 in this one, but when you pull this down, you can get at the CO2, and the whole mechanism basically is what pierces the CO2. So you get your leverage when you pop it closed. It gives you your leverage for piercing the CO2. That's a kind of neat system. All right, moving on to the Gamo. Again, another cutout ejection port gun, okay, which is nice. Not much going on in there, but at least it's cut out. It's that sort of funky looking weird safety, unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Now, there is no real steel version of this, so the safety is, you know, true to this gun, I guess you could say. Again, you can see here this made in Japan for Gamo, right? Okay. Basically, you got to just pop this off to get at the CO2. You can see there's a lot of metal in here. Steel tabs, which is nice. I like it when they have a steel tab. Now, I'm going to have to show you this. I'm going to have to pull this one out. They all have these rotary mags. Mine won't pop out. It's the spring, internal spring is kind of busted on it. That can happen with some of these guns, so it's a bit of a pain to get the mag out, but it does come out. So there should be a spring inside that when you release the mag, it allows it to pop out, but it's not working on this gun, unfortunately. Okay, take a look. I'll show you how that's supposed to work on the PX4 Storm, right? It's in, it's out. It's in, it's out. Isn't that much easier? And that's the way they're supposed to work. Okay, last but not least, we have our MP9. Oops, I just took my cover off, but that's okay. If we can focus, there we go. No cutout ejection port. You do have this cool stock, folding stock, right? Nice. Here's your charging handle, right? And you'll notice you can hear the actual hammer or striker release and fall, right? So it's like a bolt. It's probably like an internal bolt like you'd find on the real gun. Now, all I'm doing right now is indexing the magazine. I'm not releasing the bolt. I have to charge it. The internal blowback will keep working that internal bolt and charging it for me. So once I actually start shooting it, okay? Now this gun does have a rail up front here where you can put stuff on. I've got a little foregrip on there, right? You do have this sort of trigger safety. I'm not sure if it actually works. I don't think it does. No, it does. So it is a working trigger safety. Okay, you pop this off to get at your CO2 and your magazine. Okay, so that's where your CO2 goes. You can pop this out. You got a CO2 basically loading canister type system there to get it in, and then you have your stick mag. It's hard to do this on camera. There it is. It's a little bit longer than the other one just because it's got a longer handle. Okay, so it just pops in. One thing I don't like is this little bottom piece. It comes off pretty easy, so you got to be careful with that. And this does actually have a sort of true working safety like you'd find on the real version in the same place. Okay, no actual like slide or bolt release. It doesn't work on this gun, again, for the same reason with the rotary mags. Okay, pick rail on top to put different things. You do also have iron sights as well you can use with this gun. And sort of a recessed barrel, but not really. The only gun that really has a recessed barrel that I would consider recessed is this guy right here, the P25. Okay, a little bit of a recessed barrel. Alright, I hope this comparison review video helps you figure out what gun you might be considering purchasing at some point. Don't forget to check out their individual tabletop reviews. I also usually have a shooting review for each of these guns, so you can check out all those reviews over on my Replica Airguns YouTube channel. Also, don't forget to come on down to replicaAirguns.com where I have articles, post reviews. I'll have a written article for this comparison video that already has a lot of the information I've talked about in this video, but if you want to see it in a written form with some additional photos, you can check that out. And while you're there, you can also visit our online Canada and US Replica Airgun stores where we sell air guns, BB guns, pellet guns, blank guns, knives, and other accessories. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.